All right, so I just wanted to kind of make a quick video, a recap on these goggles that I've been using, the Goggles X, for the last 6 months or so. I bought them in December of 2023. I got them at the end of that month. So basically I've been using them since January of 2024. It's now the middle of July in 2024. And I will say, using these, the long story short is I love them. They're great and exactly what I need for my purposes. But that doesn't say that it didn't come with some, I would say a pretty good adventure on the way from getting them brand new to where we are now. As most everybody else did, I went through all of the updates and heating issues and this and that, and you probably know all about that stuff already. But what I want to tell you is how I use them and why they work so well for me, and maybe that would help for you. So my use case, for the most part, is real estate. I fly little drones through real estate houses, and this is me flying through this house with my Goggles X and my Avatar HD system. The camera is the Pro camera, nothing fancy whatsoever, it's just the Pro camera. Most of my VTXs have the dual antenna version. The smaller one that I have has a single antenna version, but there's only a little bit of difference really between range and penetration between those two. For the most part, for 99% of my real estate videos, I use the single antenna version. And I use these goggles, Goggles X. Of course, it started out with a lot of troubles with these goggles, so much so that I bought a second pair just for a backup because I couldn't trust them. There were so many times they would lock up, overheat, random things. The menu just wouldn't work right sometimes. And so I bought a second pair just in case I was out on a shoot and had an issue. Not only that, I also had the standalone VRX system that went with these. You know, that just came a little bit cumbersome with all the wires and stuff hanging off my head. So I switched to the Goggles X basically for simplicity. So using these for real estate, I mean, so far you can see, I'm showing you right now the DVR that my goggles recorded in the Goggles X. So the settings I use in the goggles are 700 milliwatt output power. I don't need any more than that most of the time. And the more I read about it, you just kind of get diminishing returns for anything more than that. I use 720p standard bit rate and high frame rate. Those are the best settings that you can use as far as penetration goes and getting the cleanest signal for the longest amount of time, or the furthest out. So I've said for what I use, I don't really need 1080p. I don't really need high bit rate because nobody's seeing this but me. On the goggles, I use the TrueRC antennas, Stubbies, and I use the patch antennas on the front of the goggles. I've found out the antennas that come with it are not great. They're not terrible, but they're really not great. These TrueRCs are just better. I also match these same TrueRCs on all of my quads. That's always the best case, is to match your antennas on the quad and on the goggles. I use the patch antenna just to give me that little bit of extra. I honestly don't know if it helps that much more. I've used it with and without the patch antenna with the TrueRC Stubbies in its place, and honestly don't really tell that much of a difference. It's kind of an ease of mind knowing that I have a patch, and that if it does the signal gets a little iffy, I can kind of point my head towards that direction and hopefully it'll give me a little bit more. There's a GoPro on all of my real estate rigs because I don't give the footage from the Avatar system to the client. The only reason I use this system is just for FPV feed, just to have a digital FPV feed for me to see more clearly the things that I'm flying around, especially in these low light situations like through these houses. The other reason I use these is for live streaming. Video directly from the quad as it flies from the drone. Here's some footage of that I've done recently with some, I guess you could call them UTV rock racers. Unfortunately, I don't have any VTX recordings of it from the goggles, but you can see, I mean, I'm out here flying in mud and rain and 100-degree weather and this and that. And these goggles and this Avatar HD system has absolutely worked basically perfectly the entire time. since the very last update. The version I'm on now is, I think, 37.4, I don't know, whatever the very latest is as of today. I'm on the beta version before that. I haven't even updated to the brand new, whatever the released version is. I have a ton of these quads. I have 3 basic real estate quads that I use with this system, and I have 2 live streaming quads that I have with this system. And they all have basically the same rig on it with the Pro camera and the Avatar system. So I've really enjoyed using these goggles. Honestly, they have worked perfectly for me. The reason, I tell you, whenever you're shopping for a digital system, you have basically 3 options. You've got HD0, you've got Walksnail, and you've got DJI. And the reason why I went with Walksnail over all of those, it was almost a no-brainer to me, is the features that they offer that I would actually use. That on top of the cost of the system altogether. So basically, I didn't pick HD0 because that's mostly for racing. You know, that's a great racing feed, but whenever you can't really live stream from that, you can't really, I don't know, I don't like the way HD0 breaks up whenever I'm flying through places. Walksnail beat that, and DJI beat that out completely. Now, the reason why I didn't pick DJI over Walksnail is because, A, it's just too expensive. It's way too expensive for what it is for a business like I have and for my use case. Yes, they basically arguably make the best video out of their FPV cameras than any of those other systems. They do. There's no doubt about that. They beat Walksnail out of video quality and clarity, in my opinion, over anything else. However, the Avatar system ain't that much worse. It's actually really close to the same in most situations, especially out during the day like this on a nice sunny day with a blue sky. I mean, it's honestly apples to apples in that case. You can't really tell the 2 systems apart for the most part. So just on that alone, it makes more sense to go Walksnail than it does DJI. The other reason I went Walksnail, which was the deal breaker, was that the HDMI out of these Goggles X is what I use for live streaming output. The HDMI out from my goggles, that's the absolute best thing. Yeah, DJI can do that, but you have to buy a whole other basic system to make that work. And you have to buy like the smart controller, all this other mess that you got to hook in and do this and just hope it all works. I come from an AV background, and people in this industry know the fewer amount of connections you have, the better that system is gonna work. If you have 4 cables in between you and the production booth, you're 4 times more likely to have a failure than you were if you just have one straight out of your goggles into the production booth. To me, that just makes way more sense. And it's cheaper. It's just a whole lot cheaper than it is using DJI. And I can promise you, you can barely tell a difference between the 2 video feeds when you're flying in most conditions. Sure, Walksnail beats DJI out in some instances, and DJI beats Walksnail out in others. But for the most part, for everything that I do with this system, this is just a no-brainer to use. It just makes perfect sense for me. There are a few issues, however, that being said, that I do have with this system. Not many. One is the goggle foam that it's shipped with and the strap. You basically just throw that away as soon as you get it. For Western faces, at least for my face and most of the people that I know that have tried these on, that goggle foam that comes with it, the face foam, is horrendous. It doesn't work at all. There's so much light leak on the sides, it just doesn't work well. There is a foam that I found that works so much better, that will fit most of everyone else's faces, at least on this side of the planet. And I'll link that down below and show you what it is that I use. But man, it's so much better. And then the strap that it comes with isn't terrible, but it ain't great. So I just bought a DJI goggle strap off of, I believe it was Pyrodrone or Get FPV or one of those places. Just buy one of those higher end or replacement goggle straps, and it works. It's the same sort of fitting that it connects to. So that's probably one of the main issues. The other real issue that I have is the HDMI out isn't a clean video feed. And what that means is whenever you're flying, you have your OSD, that you can see your battery and all this fun stuff that you need while you're flying. But when you take the HDMI out and send it to the production booth for a live stream or for a client to watch, they don't need to see any of that. All they need is a clean, nothing but picture video feed. And I wish there was a way, maybe an update they could do at some point where you can have a clean HDMI feed out of the goggles. That's really my only two major complaints. As far as the heating issue is concerned, I did the whole heat sink upgrade and have not had an issue since. Absolutely not. I've left this thing on, especially when I do these live streams. They'll last for 3 hours. I've left these goggles on for over an hour at a time and no overheating, hardly any. You can tell the very slightest amount of difference between the two lenses, but it's nothing that you can't, you literally just see it as soon as you look at the image from the goggles, but after about 5 seconds, it's gone. You forget about it. So that's it. I mean, the heating issue has been nothing. I guess one other complaint, the fogging on the lenses isn't great. I'll put it that way. I don't really know how they could possibly fix it other than putting a stronger fan in it or some sort of duct worked on the inside of the goggles. But unfortunately, if you store your goggles inside and you go outside and think that you're going to fly within the next 15-20 minutes without your goggles acclimating or your sweat on your forehead getting on the lenses and all that fun stuff, they're just going to fog up. Every FPV goggle does that. It's always going to happen. The fans blowing over the lenses is basically non-existent in these goggles. I believe it draws air in from there instead of blowing it in, which is probably a good thing, mainly because you don't want air blowing on your eyes while you're flying. It'll dry them out. But there's just not enough air being sucked out of there to keep your lenses from fogging up. And then I'll say one last issue that I don't like about these, and it could be due to the foam, the new foam that I use, is that I can't really see the corners of my images on both eyes. So the way the diopters work, you can move them back and forth, left to right. Well, the left one, I'll move it all the way, I'll move it to the center of the screen, can't really see the edge of anything. So I'll have to move the left one a little bit to the left to see the edge of that side, and then move my right one a little bit to the right to see the edge of that side. Now the center is a little weird. So finding the balance right there between being able to see the image in the center clearly without getting a headache, and then being able to see the outside edges. Honestly, unless you have an OSD element or something, some reason why you would absolutely need to see the corners of the image, it's not that big of a deal. The only time I ever use it is when I can't do a clean HDMI feed out. So when I live stream, I have to have the battery on there so I know how much battery I have left. Well, that battery I have to stick in the top right corner because the production booth puts a logo or a bug over the video. And I hide my battery percentage behind that on the OSD. And it's right up there in that top right corner, and it's so hard to see it whenever I have to just basically look up there for about a second before I can see what it is. Those are the only drawbacks. And honestly, they're not that much. It's little things you can overcome. The foam, fix that with, I think it was a $10, $12 face plate thing. The fogging up, I just know when it's gonna fog, and so I bring a towel, I wipe my forehead, I go outside, let the goggles acclimate, and do that thing. It's no big deal. Not seeing the corners of the lenses, it's really not that big a deal. Honestly, I don't really count that as too much of a fault. And so every one of these issues that I've had with the goggles is easily overcome, other than the HDMI out. That's the only thing that hasn't been fixed that I wish could be fixed. Now there are features that have been promised, like Wi-Fi, something to do with Wi-Fi streaming from the goggles. And there's a head tracker thing, there's analog out module, there's whatever the top they're supposed to do with the top. Like, I get it. When they promise all these features at the very beginning, it makes the product look better. I don't care about any of those things because the way I use the goggles, I don't use any of those things. The Wi-Fi streaming, I honestly can't understand why anybody would ever use that. I just don't. It sounds like a cool little gimmicky thing that you can just say that your goggles do. But for the most part, you're not going to stream Wi-Fi from your goggles. It's going to be terrible. It's not going to look good at all, especially when you can just do HDMI out and it's perfectly clean video. And then there's the head tracking thing. I'm never going to use head tracking. I know I think they just came out with some sort of head tracker. They say that it works with it. Honestly, again, it's one of those things where I don't really care. There are standalone head trackers that you can put on just about anything that you want, that you can just glue or somehow mount to the top of your goggles. That's not that big a deal. These different features that they've offered, I don't really care that they're not. I honestly wish they wouldn't work on those and just work on things like making penetration better, making the goggles HDMI out work. I keep saying that because that's a big thing. Or not work, but that they work with a clean video feed, and just little things like that. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the penetration of these goggles. You can see as I'm flying through this house and up and over it and way out there, you basically have crystal clear video the entire time. I'm sitting, I'll show you right here, as I come through this hallway, right here in the right on this room, that's where I'm standing in that room. I'm standing facing the street because I know whenever I fly through the house and I go up above the pond, I know I need these patch antennas going straight out towards as much coverage as I can get. And I fly all the way to the road. I mean, that's pretty far. That's probably over, I would say, over 100 yards or more through a house, basically, through many walls in a house. For me, penetration, I mean, I've flown through these, you can see here, I've flown through these warehouses with all this racking and all these metal walls, concrete walls, no issues whatsoever. I've flown in neighborhoods where there's just Wi-Fi everywhere, and every once in a while your video signal won't be as strong, but for the absolute most part, I mean, I've had zero issues. And if it does just so happen, if I fly beyond the limit and it goes out, and this has happened before, in my head, I just picture where I am and I turn around and start going up and towards where I was, and it's come back. I've never lost a drone due to video failure. I've gone through all kinds of trees and up and through over lakes and everything, and nothing, no issues. For the range that I need, this thing has been absolutely phenomenal. So that's about it. I mean, that's really all I wanted to say. This is my 6-month review of these goggles, and I've convinced several other people to use these over DJI. And not by just using words, but by showing them this system is so much easier to use than DJI. It's literally, you just plug it in and it works just like all your regular analog VTX stuff does. With DJI, you got to sign in to your account. You got to have Wi-Fi to do this. Like, that's the thing with Walksnail. It's just so much easier, especially for the two things that I use it more for, and that's flying through these houses, doing real estate, and for live streaming from the drone itself. So I'm going to leave you with that. I hope that you will give Caddx and Walksnail and this Avatar HD system and the Goggles X another thought, because there are plenty of reviews out there that say this and that negatively about it. The thing is, I just don't think those people actually use these systems day to day. You know, it's hard to compare Walksnail to DJI because DJI is a giant company with literally unlimited amount of resources in R&D and engineering. And Walksnail, Caddx, you know what they started as? Caddx, as far as I know, was a backup camera company, and they realized FPV was the way to go and started making FPV stuff, and this is the first goggle they ever made, and is this good. Like, that's the thing that you just have to remember. Yeah, it's going to have some faults, but one day the next version is going to be better, and they're going to start to figure this stuff out and start to make these systems even better, and DJI will just continue to make things better as well, for the price, for the quality, and for what you get. And for me especially, Walksnail is the way to go. All right, guys, appreciate you listening in. I know I said a lot. Hopefully this helped you and could persuade you to maybe give this system a try. If you got any questions, leave them down in the comments, and I'll see if I can answer them as much as possible. Maybe I'll check in another 6 months and give a 1-year review. Check back then, and we'll see you.